You stand at the threshold of your greatest becoming, holding within yourself an empire waiting to be claimed, a kingdom of possibility that exists nowhere else in all creation but in the magnificent territory of your own potential. Every single human being who walks this earth carries within them the sovereign power to rule their own destiny, to shape their circumstances, to rise above limitations that once seemed insurmountable, and this truth, this fundamental principle of human greatness, forms the beating heart of a philosophy that has transformed countless lives across generations. Orison Swett Marden understood something that most people spend their entire lives never discovering: that greatness isn't reserved for a select few, that nobility isn't determined by birth or circumstance, that every person possesses within themselves the raw materials necessary to build a life of extraordinary achievement and profound satisfaction. The title itself, "Every Man a King," speaks to the democratic nature of human potential, the revolutionary idea that royal qualities, excellence, achievement, and personal sovereignty belong not to an elite class, but to anyone willing to claim their birthright through dedicated effort and unwavering commitment to self-development. Think about what it truly means to be a king in the context of your own life. A king doesn't wait for permission to act, doesn't seek validation from others before making important decisions, doesn't allow temporary setbacks to convince him that his throne has been permanently lost. A king understands that his kingdom, whether vast or small, depends entirely on his ability to govern himself first, to master his thoughts, to direct his energies toward purposeful ends, to maintain dignity and composure regardless of external circumstances. This internal sovereignty, this mastery of self, represents the foundation upon which all external success must be built. Consider for a moment the young person starting out in life, looking at the world with all its complexity, competition, and seemingly insurmountable challenges. Society often teaches us to know our place, to accept limitations, to be realistic about our prospects. But Marden's philosophy challenges these limiting beliefs at their core. He argues that the circumstances of your birth, the limitations of your early education, the setbacks you've experienced, none of these things determine your ultimate destination. What determines your destination is the kingdom you build within your own mind, the standards you set for yourself, the vision you hold of your highest possible self. The journey toward personal kingship begins with a fundamental shift in self-perception. Most people go through life as subjects rather than sovereigns, allowing circumstances to dictate their responses, permitting other people's opinions to shape their self-image, accepting whatever life hands them rather than actively creating the life they desire. This passive approach to existence represents the abdication of personal power, the surrender of the throne before the battle has even begun. Marden insists that the first step toward claiming your kingdom involves recognizing that you were never meant to be a subject in your own life, that you were designed for sovereignty, created with the capacity to rule over your responses, your habits, your direction, your ultimate destiny. Throughout history, we see examples of individuals who embodied this principle of personal kingship long before they achieved external recognition or material success. Abraham Lincoln, growing up in poverty on the frontier, educated himself by firelight, reading every book he could borrow, developing his mind and character long before circumstances gave him opportunities for leadership. He didn't wait for ideal conditions to begin his preparation for greatness. He understood instinctively that the kingdom must be built internally before it can manifest externally. His dignity, his moral clarity, his capacity for leadership, all of these developed during years when his external circumstances suggested he would remain forever obscure. The same pattern appears again and again in the lives of those who rise from humble beginnings to positions of influence and achievement. They share a common characteristic, an internal sense of royalty that exists independent of external validation. This doesn't mean arrogance or entitlement, quite the opposite. True personal kingship carries with it enormous responsibility, the obligation to develop your capacities to their fullest extent, to serve purposes larger than yourself, to maintain standards of excellence even when no one is watching. Marden emphasizes that this journey toward personal sovereignty requires tremendous courage because it demands that you separate your sense of worth from your current circumstances. When you're struggling financially, facing rejection, dealing with setbacks, it takes extraordinary courage to maintain the inner conviction that you are building something significant, that your current difficulties represent temporary conditions rather than permanent limitations. This courage doesn't come from blind optimism or denial of reality. It comes from a deep understanding of human potential, a recognition that the greatest achievements in history emerge from individuals who refuse to let their current circumstances define their ultimate possibilities. Let me share with you the story of a young man who discovered this principle through personal crisis. He had grown up in comfortable circumstances, never questioning his path, following the expected route of education and career. Then, in his late 20s, everything collapsed. His business failed, his relationships fell apart, his health deteriorated. He found himself starting over with nothing but debt and disappointment. During his darkest moments, feeling like a complete failure, he encountered Marden's writings. The concept of personal kingship initially seemed absurd to him. How could he consider himself a king when he couldn't even pay his bills, when his confidence was shattered, when he felt like he had proven himself fundamentally inadequate? But gradually, he began to understand that kingship in Marden's philosophy wasn't about current conditions. It was about the decision to govern yourself with dignity, regardless of circumstances. He started small, establishing sovereignty over his morning routine, his thought patterns, his daily habits. Instead of sleeping until noon and wallowing in regret, he began rising early, treating each day as an opportunity to reclaim territory in his personal kingdom. He couldn't control his bank account immediately, but he could control his discipline. He couldn't undo his past failures, but he could govern his response to them. Month by month, this internal shift began producing external results. His consistency attracted attention from potential employers. His renewed confidence opened doors that had previously been closed. His commitment to personal excellence created opportunities that hadn't existed before. Within 3 years, he had not only recovered from his setbacks, but had built something more substantial than anything he'd achieved during his supposedly successful earlier years. The difference wasn't primarily in his circumstances, it was in his fundamental orientation toward himself and his possibilities. This transformation illustrates a crucial principle in Marden's philosophy, that personal kingship expresses itself first through small victories of self-governance before manifesting in larger external achievements. You don't become a king by suddenly acquiring a kingdom. You acquire a kingdom by becoming someone capable of ruling it. This means developing qualities like consistency, integrity, discipline, vision, and resilience, long before circumstances reward these qualities with obvious success. Many people make the mistake of waiting for ideal conditions before they begin living like royalty. They tell themselves they'll develop better habits once they get the right job, they'll invest in self-improvement once they have more money, they'll start taking themselves seriously once other people recognize their worth. But this backwards approach guarantees continued mediocrity because external circumstances generally reflect internal orientation rather than creating it. The job doesn't make you disciplined, your discipline makes you attractive to better employment opportunities. Money doesn't make you responsible, your responsibility attracts financial opportunity. Recognition doesn't create genuine worth, authentic worth eventually commands recognition. Marden understood that the cultivation of inner royalty requires specific practices and commitments. First among these is the practice of maintaining high standards for yourself regardless of whether anyone else notices or cares. A true king doesn't lower his standards because he finds himself temporarily without a court. His standards reflect who he is, not his current circumstances or audience. This means dressing with dignity even when you're broke, speaking with precision even when you're among those who are careless with language, maintaining your integrity even when dishonesty would be easier and more profitable. These practices might seem superficial, but they serve a crucial psychological function. They reinforce your internal sense of sovereignty. They remind you that you answer to yourself first, that your standards come from within rather than being imposed from without. When you maintain these standards during difficult times, you're exercising the exact muscles required for larger leadership and achievement. You're proving to yourself that your commitment to excellence isn't contingent on favorable circumstances. Another essential element of personal kingship involves the careful governance of your mental kingdom. Your mind represents your primary territory, the realm over which you have the most direct control, and its condition largely determines the quality of everything else in your life. A mind filled with negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, resentment, and fear cannot produce circumstances of prosperity, achievement, and fulfillment. The connection between internal mental states and external life conditions isn't mystical, it's entirely practical. Your thoughts shape your decisions create your actions determine your habits define your character, and your character creates your destiny. This chain of causation means that taking dominion over your thought life represents the most powerful leverage point for transforming your circumstances. Yet most people exercise virtually no governance over their mental realm. They allow any thought to take up residence, they ruminate on grievances, they replay failures, they indulge in worry and anxiety as though these were productive activities. A king who allowed his kingdom to be overrun by hostile forces, who failed to guard his borders, who permitted chaos to reign within his territory, would quickly lose everything. Yet this is exactly what most people do with their mental kingdom, and they wonder why their lives feel chaotic and disappointing. Establishing sovereignty over your thought life requires vigilance and practice. It means noticing when your mind drifts toward destructive patterns and deliberately redirecting it toward more constructive channels. It means refusing to entertain thoughts that undermine your dignity, that reinforce limiting beliefs, that keep you focused on problems rather than solutions. This doesn't mean denying reality or engaging in toxic positivity. It means choosing which aspects of reality deserve your sustained attention and which deserve to be acknowledged briefly and then released. For example, if you're currently struggling financially, you need to acknowledge the reality of your situation clearly enough to make practical decisions. But you don't need to spend hours each day dwelling on how unfair it is, how anxious you feel, how hopeless everything seems. That kind of mental activity doesn't solve problems, it drains the energy and clarity required for actual solutions. A sovereign mind acknowledges difficulties without becoming imprisoned by them, faces challenges without being defeated by them, recognizes limitations without accepting them as permanent. Marden also emphasizes the importance of vision in establishing personal kingship. A king needs a clear sense of what his kingdom should become, what purposes it should serve, what values it should embody. Without this overarching vision, daily decisions lack coherence, energy gets dispersed across too many directions, and the kingdom never develops beyond a chaotic collection of disconnected activities. Your personal vision serves as the constitution of your kingdom, the fundamental document that guides all subsidiary decisions and actions. Creating this vision requires deep reflection on what you genuinely value, what kind of person you want to become, what contributions you want to make during your lifetime. This isn't about adopting someone else's definition of success or following a path just because society approves of it. Personal kingship demands authenticity, a genuine connection between your daily activities and your deepest values. When this alignment exists, work becomes meaningful rather than merely obligatory, challenges become engaging rather than overwhelming, and even difficult periods carry a sense of purpose that makes them bearable. Many people resist this kind of deep reflection because they fear what they might discover about the gap between their current life and their authentic desires. They've been living according to other people's expectations for so long that they've lost touch with their own authentic vision. But this avoidance only perpetuates dissatisfaction. You cannot build a meaningful kingdom on a foundation of other people's blueprints. The architecture must reflect your unique values, talents, and aspirations, or the resulting structure will always feel foreign and uncomfortable. The process of developing your vision doesn't require perfect clarity from the beginning. It can start with broad directions and gradually become more specific as you gain experience and self-knowledge. Perhaps you know you want to build something that serves others, or create beauty, or solve complex problems, or build financial independence. These general directions provide enough guidance to begin making aligned decisions, and those decisions generate experience that helps refine your vision over time. One of the most challenging aspects of claiming personal kingship involves maintaining sovereignty in the face of criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding. When you decide to live according to your own standards rather than conforming to external expectations, you inevitably encounter resistance. Family members question your choices, peers mock your ambitions, conventional wisdom suggests you're being unrealistic. During these moments, your commitment to personal sovereignty faces its greatest test. A king must develop the capacity to stand alone when necessary, to trust his own judgment even when popular opinion runs contrary, to maintain his course despite temporary unpopularity. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or closed to feedback. Wise kings seek counsel from trusted advisors and remain open to legitimate criticism, but they don't outsource their fundamental decision-making authority to the crowd, and they don't allow temporary disapproval to shake their commitment to their vision. History shows us repeatedly that those who accomplish significant things almost always face periods of opposition and doubt from their contemporaries. Edison was mocked for his failed experiments before his inventions revolutionized the world. The Wright brothers were dismissed as foolish dreamers before they achieved powered flight. Every entrepreneur who built something significant faced countless people who explained why their idea wouldn't work. The ability to maintain inner sovereignty during these periods of external opposition often makes the difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who abandon their vision at the first sign of resistance. This capacity for independent judgment must be balanced with humility and genuine openness to learning. The goal isn't to become stubborn or closed-minded, convinced that your perspective is always correct regardless of evidence. The goal is to develop the ability to evaluate feedback thoughtfully without being destabilized by it, to consider criticism without being crushed by it, to remain open to growth without becoming dependent on external validation. Marden also addresses the relationship between personal kingship and service to others. Some might misunderstand his emphasis on sovereignty and self-development as advocating selfish individualism, but nothing could be further from his actual philosophy. True kingship, he argues, carries with it an obligation to serve, to use your developed capacities for purposes that benefit others, to recognize that your kingdom exists not merely for your own enjoyment, but as a platform for contribution. The kings who earned genuine respect throughout history weren't those who hoarded wealth and power for purely selfish ends. They were leaders who used their position to create prosperity for their people, who defended the vulnerable, who built institutions that outlasted their own lives. Similarly, personal kingship in modern life finds its highest expression not in the accumulation of possessions or status symbols, but in the development of capacities that allow you to make meaningful contributions to your community, your field, your relationships. This orientation toward service doesn't contradict the emphasis on self-development, it actually depends on it. You cannot give what you don't possess. You cannot serve powerfully from a position of weakness and underdevelopment. The person who neglects their own growth in the name of serving others often ends up with little of substance to offer. They become like a business operating at a loss, depleting their resources faster than they're replenished, eventually reaching a state of exhaustion and resentment that serves no one. The proper sequence involves developing yourself into someone capable of powerful service, someone with skills to offer, energy to share, wisdom to impart, resources to deploy. This requires a season of intensive focus on self-development, a period during which your primary obligation is to your own growth. This isn't selfish, it's preparatory. The farmer who plants seeds isn't being selfish by not immediately sharing food with hungry neighbors. He's engaging in the necessary preparation that will eventually allow him to feed many people. As you develop your personal kingdom, establishing sovereignty over your thoughts, habits, standards, and direction, you naturally become someone with more to offer others. Your consistency inspires those around you. Your discipline creates opportunities that you can share. Your clarity provides guidance that helps others find their own path. Your strength allows you to support those who are temporarily weak. In this way, personal kingship and generous service become mutually reinforcing rather than contradictory. The financial dimension of personal kingship deserves particular attention because so many people allow money, or the lack of it, to rob them of their sense of sovereignty. When you're struggling financially, it's easy to feel like a powerless subject rather than a sovereign king. Bills arrive like hostile invaders demanding tribute you can't pay. Debt feels like chains limiting your freedom. The gap between your current resources and your aspirations can seem impossibly vast. Yet Marden insists that financial sovereignty, like all other forms of sovereignty, begins internally before manifesting externally. The person who develops kingly habits around money, who governs their resources wisely regardless of their current level, who maintains dignity and discipline even during scarcity, that person is preparing themselves to handle prosperity when it arrives. Meanwhile, the person who tells themselves they'll become financially responsible once they have more money is almost certainly deluding themselves. The habits you establish during scarcity tend to persist during abundance unless you deliberately transform them. What does financial sovereignty look like in practical terms? It means spending less than you earn regardless of how little you earn. It means maintaining accurate awareness of your financial situation rather than avoiding it out of anxiety. It means making deliberate choices about where your money goes rather than wondering at the end of the month where it all went. It means treating yourself as the sovereign authority over your resources rather than allowing circumstances, impulses, or other people to dictate your financial decisions. These practices require tremendous discipline when money is tight, but that's precisely what makes them valuable. You're building the internal structures that will allow you to govern larger resources wisely when they become available. The person who can manage a small kingdom well demonstrates the capacity to handle a larger one. The person who brings chaos to a small kingdom proves they're not ready for greater responsibility. Consider the example of someone earning a modest income who nonetheless manages to save a small percentage each month. From a purely mathematical perspective, saving $50 per month when you're barely covering expenses might seem pointless. It won't make you rich. It won't solve your financial problems quickly. But from the perspective of personal sovereignty, this practice is invaluable because it reinforces your sense of agency, your capacity to direct resources toward chosen ends, your refusal to let circumstances completely dictate your decisions. That internal shift, that experience of sovereignty, becomes the foundation for handling much larger sums wisely later. The development of personal kingship also requires attention to your physical kingdom, your body and health. A king who neglects his physical condition undermines his capacity for everything else. Energy, clarity, resilience, all of these depend significantly on physical well-being. Yet many people treat their bodies with shocking neglect, fueling themselves with terrible nutrition, depriving themselves of adequate sleep, avoiding any physical activity, and then wondering why they feel exhausted and discouraged. Reclaiming sovereignty over your physical condition doesn't require becoming an elite athlete or achieving some impossible standard of perfection. It simply means treating your body with the respect and care appropriate to something valuable, something entrusted to your governance. This means making reasonable decisions about nutrition most of the time, getting adequate sleep regularly, incorporating some form of movement into your routine, and avoiding obviously destructive habits. The resistance many people feel toward these basic practices often reflects deeper issues around self-worth and sovereignty. When you don't genuinely believe you're valuable, when you don't see yourself as royalty worthy of proper care, neglecting your physical well-being feels natural. But as you begin to claim your throne, as you develop that internal sense of sovereignty, these basic self-care practices become non-negotiable. A king maintains his strength because he recognizes he has important work to do, battles to fight, responsibilities to fulfill. One of the most powerful aspects of Marden's philosophy involves his emphasis on beginning immediately rather than waiting for ideal conditions. Many people postpone claiming their kingship until some future point when circumstances seem more favorable. They'll start taking themselves seriously once they get a better job, once they finish their education, once their children are grown, once they have more time, once conditions improve. But these delays represent another form of abdication, another way of surrendering sovereignty by allowing circumstances to determine when you're permitted to begin living purposefully. The truth is that ideal conditions rarely arrive. Life remains complicated, demanding, and imperfect, regardless of which stage you've reached. The person who waits for everything to be perfect before claiming their throne will likely wait forever. Personal kingship must be claimed in the midst of imperfect circumstances, during times of pressure and limitation, right now, rather than at some imagined future point when everything becomes easy. This doesn't mean you can instantly transform every aspect of your life. It means you can begin today to establish sovereignty over something, to make one area of your life subject to your conscious governance rather than your unconscious habits and external circumstances. Perhaps you begin with your morning routine, establishing sovereignty over the first hour of your day. Perhaps you begin with your physical space, creating order in your immediate environment. Perhaps you begin with your communication, choosing to speak with greater precision and integrity. The specific starting point matters less than the decision to start, the refusal to postpone sovereignty indefinitely. As you establish control over one area, you build momentum and capability that naturally extends to other domains. The discipline you develop in one context transfers to others. The confidence you gain from small victories provides fuel for larger challenges. Your kingdom expands naturally as your capacity for governance grows. But none of this can begin while you remain in the waiting room of someday, postponing sovereignty until circumstances grant permission. The relationship between personal kingship and adversity deserves careful examination because difficulty is inevitable in any meaningful life. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, but how you'll respond to them. This is where the true test of sovereignty emerges. Anyone can maintain dignity and direction during easy times when circumstances cooperate and success comes readily. But maintaining your throne during storms, preserving your sense of sovereignty when everything seems to be falling apart, this is what separates true kings from pretenders. Marden argues that adversity actually provides the essential testing ground where personal kingship is proven and strengthened. When you face a major setback and choose to maintain your standards anyway, you're demonstrating sovereignty in its purest form. When you encounter rejection and refuse to let it diminish your sense of worth, you're exercising genuine kingly authority over your internal kingdom. When you experience failure and choose to learn from it rather than being destroyed by it, you're showing the resilience that characterizes true leadership. Think of adversity as the resistance training of personal development. Just as muscles grow stronger only when they work against resistance, your capacity for sovereignty grows primarily through successfully navigating challenges. The person who experiences no difficulties develops no strength. The person who faces obstacles and overcomes them systematically builds the inner resources necessary for handling even greater challenges later. This doesn't mean you should seek out difficulties unnecessarily or romanticize suffering. It simply means recognizing that the challenges you inevitably encounter aren't signs that you've failed or that you're on the wrong path. They're the terrain through which all meaningful journeys pass. Your response to these difficulties reveals and develops your character far more than your response to easy circumstances. Let me tell you about a woman who embodied this principle powerfully. She had built a successful business over many years, achieving the kind of financial independence and professional respect that most people only dream about. Then, a combination of market changes and personal health issues caused everything to collapse within a single year. She lost her business, her savings, and her health simultaneously. She found herself in her 50s, broke and sick, watching everything she had built disappear. During this period, she could have reasonably concluded that her kingship had been revoked, that she had been demoted back to subject status by circumstances beyond her control. Instead, she made a different choice. She decided that her sovereignty didn't depend on her business or her bank account. It resided in her character, her standards, her response to circumstances. She couldn't control what had happened to her, but she could absolutely control what happened within her. She maintained her morning routine even though she had nowhere she needed to be. She dressed with care even though no one would see her. She continued learning and developing her skills even though she had no immediate use for them. She treated her recovery with the same attention and discipline she had once applied to her business. She governed the kingdom she still possessed, her internal world, with unwavering commitment to excellence. This internal sovereignty gradually began creating external opportunities. People noticed her resilience and dignity during difficulty. Doors opened specifically because she had maintained her standards when it would have been easy to abandon them. Within 3 years, she had rebuilt, not exactly what she had lost, but something different and in many ways more satisfying. More importantly, she had proven to herself that her kingship wasn't contingent on favorable circumstances. It was an internal quality that could survive any external storm. The practice of gratitude plays a crucial role in maintaining personal kingship, though this might not be immediately obvious. Gratitude might seem like a soft virtue, disconnected from the hard-edged work of building achievement and claiming sovereignty. But Marden understood that gratitude actually represents a form of wealth consciousness, a refusal to define yourself by what you lack, a determination to recognize and appreciate the resources you already possess. A king who spends all his time focusing on neighboring kingdoms he doesn't possess, who ignores the wealth and beauty within his own borders, who takes his subjects and resources for granted. This king will struggle to govern effectively because he's psychologically positioned as a pauper rather than as someone who possesses valuable resources. The same dynamic applies to personal kingship. When you focus exclusively on what you lack, you blind yourself to what you have, and this distorted perception undermines your capacity for effective action. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean pretending you have everything you want or denying legitimate desires for improvement. It means maintaining balanced awareness, acknowledging both what you're working toward and what you already possess. This balanced awareness prevents the paralyzing sense of deficiency that makes powerful action impossible. You can simultaneously recognize that you want to improve your financial situation while genuinely appreciating that you have food to eat today. You can work toward better health while genuinely appreciating that your body is carrying you through another day. This practice becomes especially important during difficult periods when external circumstances aren't cooperating with your desires. During these times, maintaining awareness of what remains good in your life, what still works, what you can still appreciate. This awareness provides the psychological foundation that allows you to keep moving forward. Complete despair emerges from the conviction that nothing is good, that everything is terrible, that you possess nothing of value. Gratitude combats this totalizing negativity by insisting on accurate perception of the mixed reality that actually exists. The development of personal kingship also requires careful attention to your associations and relationships. The people you surround yourself with significantly influence your capacity to maintain sovereignty and pursue excellence. Some relationships support your growth, challenge you to reach higher, reflect back your potential, and celebrate your progress. Other relationships undermine your development, reinforce limiting beliefs, drain your energy, and subtly discourage your ambitions. A wise king carefully chooses his advisors and associates, recognizing that surrounding yourself with mediocrity and negativity makes personal excellence nearly impossible. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or cutting off everyone who isn't successful. It means being intentional about who has regular access to your attention and energy, who influences your thinking, who shapes your sense of what's possible. If you spend your time primarily with people who complain constantly, who blame external circumstances for their difficulties, who mock ambition and excellence, you'll find it extremely difficult to maintain your commitment to personal kingship. Their attitudes become the water you swim in, the air you breathe, and you'll unconsciously absorb their limitations as your own. Conversely, spending time with people who take responsibility for their lives, who pursue meaningful goals despite obstacles, who maintain high standards for themselves, this exposure elevates your own standards and possibilities. You begin to see your challenges differently when you're around people who view obstacles as normal and surmountable rather than as evidence of impossibility. Making changes in this area can be difficult, especially when problematic relationships involve family members or long-standing friendships. You don't necessarily need to completely cut people out of your life, but you do need to become more intentional about protecting your mental and emotional space, limiting exposure to toxic influences, and deliberately seeking out more positive associations. This might mean joining groups or communities aligned with your growth objectives, seeking mentors who embody qualities you want to develop, or simply being more selective about how much time and energy you invest in various relationships. The goal isn't isolation or superiority, it's creating an environment that supports rather than undermines your commitment to personal sovereignty and excellence. The role of education and continuous learning in personal kingship cannot be overstated. A kingdom that doesn't grow eventually stagnates and declines. Your personal kingdom expands primarily through the expansion of your knowledge, skills, and capabilities. This means treating your ongoing education as a royal obligation, something you pursue not because you have to, but because excellence demands it. In previous eras, formal education was often the primary pathway to knowledge, but today we live in an unprecedented age of accessible information. You can learn almost anything through books, online courses, videos, podcasts, and practice. The limiting factor is rarely access to information. It's your commitment to continuously expanding your capacities. This commitment to learning serves multiple purposes in your development. Practically, it makes you more valuable in the marketplace, more capable of solving problems, more adaptable to changing circumstances. Psychologically, it reinforces your identity as someone who is growing rather than static, someone who is building rather than merely maintaining, someone who is becoming rather than simply being. The subjects you choose to study should reflect both practical necessity and genuine interest. Learning skills that increase your earning capacity makes obvious sense, but don't neglect areas of study that feed your soul, expand your perspective, or simply bring you joy. A well-rounded kingdom includes cultural richness alongside economic productivity, beauty alongside utility, wisdom alongside practical skills. Many people stop learning once their formal education ends, treating knowledge acquisition as something you do during one phase of life, rather than as an ongoing practice. This represents an enormous strategic error because the world continues changing, new opportunities emerge in new fields, and stagnant knowledge becomes obsolete knowledge. The person committed to personal kingship treats learning as a lifelong practice, continuously expanding the territories of their competence and understanding. The practice of strategic planning deserves attention as an essential element of personal kingship. A kingdom without a plan drifts according to circumstances, reacting to events rather than proactively shaping them. Your life requires the same kind of strategic thinking that any organization or enterprise requires. Thoughtful consideration of where you are, where you want to go, and what pathway will take you there. This doesn't mean creating rigid, detailed plans that become obsolete when circumstances change. It means maintaining clarity about your overall direction, identifying key milestones, recognizing important steps, and regularly reviewing your progress. Strategic planning transforms vague wishes into actionable objectives, making the gap between current reality and desired future feel navigable rather than impossibly vast. Many people resist this kind of planning because they fear committing to a specific direction, or they've had negative experiences with rigid goal-setting systems. But effective strategic planning remains flexible, adjusting as you gain new information while maintaining commitment to your overarching vision. It's less like following a rigid map and more like navigating with a compass. You know your general direction, even as the specific terrain requires constant tactical adjustments. The practice involves regularly asking yourself powerful questions. Where am I currently? Where do I want to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? What specific actions would move me toward those destinations? What obstacles can I anticipate, and how might I address them? What resources do I need to develop or acquire? What partnerships or support systems would help? What am I doing currently that undermines my objectives and needs to stop? These questions force clarity and honesty, cutting through the fog of busyness and wishful thinking that characterizes many people's approach to their lives. The answers provide the raw material for creating an actual plan, a series of intentional steps, rather than hoping that good things somehow happen through vague positive thinking. As we move deeper into this exploration of personal kingship, it's essential to address the internal obstacles that prevent most people from claiming their throne. These obstacles aren't primarily external. Most people fail to achieve sovereignty, not because circumstances prevent it, but because internal barriers block their way. Understanding these internal obstacles is the first step toward overcoming them. The first major internal obstacle is fear, particularly fear of failure and fear of judgment. When you claim sovereignty over your life, when you set ambitious goals and pursue them publicly, you risk visible failure. You become vulnerable to criticism and mockery. You might discover limits to your abilities that are painful to acknowledge. These risks feel dangerous enough that many people never truly try, preferring the safety of modest ambitions and conformity to external expectations. But this safety is illusory because the person who never tries never discovers their true capacities, never experiences the deep satisfaction of pushing beyond perceived limits, never builds the resilience that comes from failing and recovering. They remain perpetually in a kind of psychological childhood, dependent on external validation, unwilling to face the adult reality that growth requires risk and discomfort. Overcoming this fear doesn't mean eliminating it. That's probably impossible and maybe not even desirable. It means acting despite fear, choosing courage over comfort, recognizing that the pain of regret ultimately exceeds the pain of temporary failure. The person who tries and fails can adjust and try again, learning and growing through the process. The person who never tries remains frozen, protected from immediate discomfort, but condemned to long-term dissatisfaction. Another significant internal obstacle involves limiting beliefs absorbed from family, culture, and early experiences. These beliefs often operate unconsciously, shaping behavior without ever being explicitly examined. You might carry beliefs about what's possible for someone like you, what you deserve, what you're capable of, and these beliefs create invisible boundaries that feel like external obstacles even though they're entirely internal. Identifying these limiting beliefs requires honest self-examination. When you notice yourself thinking thoughts like "people like me don't succeed at that," or "I'm just not the kind of person who can do that," or "I don't deserve that level of success," you've discovered a limiting belief. These thoughts feel true because they've been repeated so many times, but truth and familiarity aren't the same thing. Challenging these beliefs involves gathering counter-evidence, finding examples of people from similar backgrounds who achieved what you're attempting, examining the logic behind the belief to see if it actually holds up under scrutiny, and consciously choosing different thoughts even when they feel awkward at first. Over time, new beliefs can replace old ones, but only through consistent practice and deliberate effort. A third major internal obstacle is the addiction to comfort and immediate gratification that characterizes modern life. Building anything significant requires sustained effort, delayed gratification, and tolerance for discomfort. But we live in a culture that constantly offers escape from difficulty through entertainment, substances, social media, food, shopping, and countless other distractions. These comforts aren't inherently bad, but when they become your primary coping mechanism for any discomfort, when you automatically reach for distraction the moment you feel bored or anxious or frustrated, you're undermining your capacity for the sustained focus required for significant achievement. You're training yourself to avoid discomfort rather than move through it, and this training makes personal kingship virtually impossible. Reclaiming your attention and your tolerance for difficulty represents one of the most important battles you'll fight in establishing personal sovereignty. This might mean creating boundaries around technology use, developing better stress management techniques than immediate escape, learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions rather than automatically numbing them, and building capacity for sustained focus on demanding tasks. The process is uncomfortable because you're essentially going through withdrawal from the constant stimulation and distraction that modern life provides. But on the other side of this discomfort lies the capacity for deep work, meaningful achievement, and genuine satisfaction that shallow pleasures can never provide. Let me share another story that illustrates these principles in action. There was a man who spent the first 40 years of his life as what he called a professional drifter. He had talent and intelligence, but he never committed to anything fully. He would start projects with enthusiasm and abandon them when they became difficult. He changed jobs frequently, always convinced the next one would be different. He accumulated knowledge in various fields, but never developed deep expertise in anything. His life wasn't terrible. He got by financially, had friends and relationships, enjoyed various pleasures. But he felt a growing sense of emptiness, a recognition that he was capable of much more than he was achieving, that his potential was being wasted through his inability to commit and follow through. In his early 40s, facing this reality with unusual honesty, he discovered Marden's concept of personal kingship. The idea initially seemed ridiculous to him. How could he consider himself a king when he had accomplished so little, when he had proven himself unreliable and unfocused? But something about the philosophy resonated with him. He realized that his drifting represented an abdication of sovereignty, a refusal to rule his own life with intentionality and discipline. He decided to reclaim his throne through a simple commitment. He chose one area of his life, his health, and decided to establish complete sovereignty over it for 90 days. No exceptions, no negotiations, no drifting. He would exercise daily, eat according to a plan he created, sleep on a consistent schedule. These weren't revolutionary practices, but for him they represented a fundamental shift from his pattern of inconsistent effort. The first weeks were brutal. His body resisted the new routine, His mind generated countless rationalizations for why he should skip workouts or break his eating plan. Every part of him wanted to return to the comfort of drifting, of doing what felt good in the moment. But he had made sovereignty his priority, and sovereignty meant governing himself even when, especially when, his impulses pulled in other directions. Around week 5, something shifted. The practices that had felt like constant battles began feeling more natural. He started experiencing the satisfaction that comes from keeping commitments to yourself, from proving through daily action that you can be trusted, that you're capable of self-governance. This internal shift was far more valuable than any physical changes, though those were significant too. After 90 days, he expanded his kingdom. He added his finances to the territories under conscious governance, then his professional development, then his relationships. Each area required the same pattern, making clear commitments, following through regardless of how he felt, building the evidence that he could rule his life rather than drift through it. Within 3 years, his life was unrecognizable. He had built a successful consulting practice in an area where he'd finally developed genuine expertise. His relationships deepened because people learned they could rely on him. His financial situation transformed because he consistently made wise decisions rather than impulsive ones. Most importantly, his internal experience changed from chronic dissatisfaction to genuine fulfillment, rooted in the knowledge that he was living with integrity and purpose. This transformation illustrates that personal kingship isn't primarily about achieving specific external markers of success, though those often follow naturally. It's about the internal shift from being a passive subject of circumstances and impulses to becoming the active sovereign of your own existence. This shift is available to anyone at any stage of life, but it requires the courage to begin and the discipline to persist. The relationship between personal kingship and contribution to something larger than yourself provides essential meaning and direction. Many people pursue success primarily for personal benefit, for the comfort, security, and pleasure it might provide. While these aren't illegitimate desires, they rarely provide sufficient motivation for sustained excellence, and they don't generate the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful contribution. Marden understood that the most powerful form of personal kingship involved building your capacities in order to serve purposes larger than your own comfort. This might mean developing skills that allow you to solve important problems, creating wealth that can support causes you believe in, cultivating wisdom that you can share with others who are struggling, building organizations that provide opportunities for others to flourish. This orientation towards service doesn't require grand gestures or global impact. It can manifest in how you show up for your family, the quality of work you deliver in your profession, the kindness you extend to people you encounter daily, the mentoring you provide to those coming up behind you. The scale matters less than the genuine commitment to using your developed capacities for purposes beyond pure self-interest. When you connect your personal development to larger purposes, several things happen. First, you gain access to deeper reserves of motivation. When the work gets hard, when you feel like quitting, connection to larger purposes provides reasons to persist that pure self-interest cannot match. Second, you escape the trap of narcissistic self-development that ultimately leads nowhere meaningful. Third, you create value that tends to return to you in unexpected ways, not through calculated exchange, but through the natural dynamics of generous contribution. Consider the teacher who spends years developing deep expertise in their subject, not merely to earn a living, but to genuinely serve their students' development. This commitment to purpose beyond paycheck shows up in how they prepare lessons, how they engage with struggling students, how they continue learning and improving their craft. The impact of such dedication extends far beyond what can be measured in test scores or salary figures. Or think about the entrepreneur who builds a business not merely to generate personal wealth, but to create products that genuinely improve people's lives and to provide excellent employment for their team. This larger purpose shapes countless decisions, encouraging choices that prioritize long-term value creation over short-term profit maximization, that treat employees as valuable contributors rather than disposable resources, that maintain quality standards even when cutting corners would be easier and more profitable. These examples illustrate how connecting personal kingship to larger purposes elevates both the journey and the destination, making the difficult work of self-development feel worthwhile and ensuring that success, when it arrives, brings genuine satisfaction rather than hollow achievement. The practice of integrity forms the foundation of sustainable personal kingship. Integrity means alignment between your values and your actions, consistency between what you profess to believe and how you actually behave, reliability in keeping commitments to yourself and others. Without integrity, your kingdom is built on sand, vulnerable to collapse the moment pressure increases or temptation appears. Many people compromise their integrity gradually, making small exceptions that seem harmless in isolation, but that cumulatively erode their character and their capacity for self-governance. They tell small lies, break minor commitments, cut corners when they think no one is watching, rationalize behavior that conflicts with their stated values. Each individual compromise might seem insignificant, but together they establish a pattern of self-betrayal that ultimately destroys the foundation of personal sovereignty. A king who cannot trust himself, who knows he will abandon his commitments when they become inconvenient, who breaks his word casually, this king possesses no real power because he has proven himself unreliable even to himself. How can you build anything significant when you cannot count on your own follow-through? How can you maintain self-respect when your actions constantly contradict your stated values? Rebuilding or maintaining integrity requires ruthless honesty about where gaps exist between your values and your behavior. This honesty can be painful because it forces you to acknowledge ways you've been deceiving yourself, promises you've broken, standards you've compromised. But this pain represents the beginning of healing rather than the problem itself. The problem is the gap between values and behavior. Acknowledging it honestly is the first step toward closing it. Closing these gaps requires making new commitments and keeping them, starting with small promises you're absolutely certain you can keep, and gradually building your track record of reliability. If you've been chronically late, start showing up on time. If you've made promises you didn't keep, start making fewer promises and keeping all of them. If you've been dishonest, start telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Each kept commitment strengthens your integrity and your capacity for self-governance. The journey toward personal kingship also requires developing what Marden calls mental toughness, the capacity to maintain your standards and direction despite difficulty, disappointment, and discouragement. Life inevitably includes periods of struggle, moments when everything seems to be going wrong, times when your efforts don't produce expected results. Mental toughness determines whether you persist through these difficult periods or abandon your objectives at the first serious obstacle. This toughness isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending difficulty doesn't hurt. It's about maintaining forward movement even when you're discouraged, keeping commitments even when motivation has vanished, trusting the process even when immediate results are disappointing. It's the difference between people who achieve significant goals and people who abandon them whenever the path becomes genuinely challenging. Building mental toughness happens primarily through successfully navigating difficult situations. Each time you persist through discomfort rather than quitting, each time you maintain your standards despite temptation to lower them, each time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you strengthen this crucial capacity. Like a muscle that grows through resistance training, mental toughness develops through successfully handling challenges. This means that difficulties, while unpleasant in the moment, serve an essential developmental purpose. They're not evidence that you're on the wrong path or that you lack what it takes to succeed. They're the necessary resistance that builds the strength required for significant achievement. Welcoming challenges from this perspective doesn't mean enjoying them, but it does mean recognizing their value and refusing to be defeated by them. The concept of compound growth applies powerfully to personal kingship. Small improvements, sustained consistently over time, produce extraordinary results through the power of compounding. A person who improves 1% per day in any area doesn't improve 365% in a year. They improve exponentially more because each day's improvement builds on all previous improvements. This principle means that you don't need to make dramatic changes all at once. In fact, attempting radical overnight transformation usually leads to failure and discouragement. Instead, focus on small, sustainable improvements that you can maintain indefinitely. Read for 15 minutes daily rather than trying to read for 5 hours once a month. Exercise for 20 minutes each morning rather than attempting intense 2-hour workouts you can't sustain. Save 5% of your income rather than waiting until you can save 30%. These small practices feel insignificant in isolation, and your impatient mind will tell you they're not enough, that you need to do something more dramatic and impressive. But this thinking misunderstands how significant change actually happens. Dramatic gestures fade quickly. Small, sustainable practices, repeated consistently, transform your life completely over time. The person who reads 15 minutes daily will consume dozens of books per year, fundamentally expanding their knowledge and perspective. The person who exercises 20 minutes each morning will develop strength and health that transforms their energy and capability. The person who saves 5% will accumulate resources that create options and security. Meanwhile, the person waiting to make dramatic changes often makes no meaningful progress at all. This principle of compound growth also applies to your identity and self-concept. Each time you keep a commitment to yourself, you reinforce your identity as someone reliable and trustworthy. Each time you persist through difficulty, you strengthen your identity as someone resilient and tough. Each time you choose integrity over convenience, you deepen your identity as someone with genuine character. These small identity shifts compound over time, transforming who you fundamentally understand yourself to be. The role of environment in supporting or undermining personal kingship cannot be ignored. While internal factors matter most, your external environment significantly influences your capacity to maintain sovereignty and pursue excellence. A chaotic environment makes focus difficult. An environment filled with temptations makes discipline challenging. An environment that lacks inspiration makes sustained motivation harder to maintain. Taking sovereignty over your environment means creating physical and social spaces that support rather than undermine your objectives. This might mean organizing your living space so it feels calm rather than chaotic, removing temptations that derail your discipline, surrounding yourself with reminders of your values and goals, creating dedicated spaces for focused work or personal development. The investment required to optimize your environment pays enormous dividends, because environment shapes behavior largely through unconscious influence. When healthy food is easily visible and accessible, while junk food requires effort to obtain, you'll naturally eat better without requiring constant willpower. When your workspace is organized and free from distractions, you'll naturally focus better. When you're surrounded by evidence of your progress and reminders of your goals, you'll naturally maintain motivation more easily. Many people underestimate the importance of environment, believing that willpower alone should be sufficient. But willpower is a limited resource that depletes through use, while environmental design works continuously without requiring ongoing effort. The wise king designs his castle to support his objectives rather than constantly battling against an environment that undermines them. As we explore the deeper dimensions of personal kingship, we must address the spiritual and philosophical foundations that give this pursuit ultimate meaning. Why does personal sovereignty matter? What makes the effort worthwhile? What gives direction to the power you're developing? Different people answer these questions differently based on their beliefs and values, but certain themes emerge consistently. Many find that personal kingship matters because it represents the full development and expression of their unique human potential, the honoring of whatever creative force or process brought them into existence. To live passively, to leave your capacities undeveloped, to drift through life without purpose or direction, this feels like a profound waste of the precious gift of consciousness and capability. Others connect personal kingship to religious or spiritual traditions that emphasize stewardship, the idea that your life and talents are resources entrusted to your care, resources you're responsible for developing and deploying wisely. From this perspective, failing to claim your sovereignty and develop your potential represents a failure of sacred responsibility. Still others find meaning in humanistic terms, recognizing that your development creates ripple effects that extend far beyond your individual life. The parent who claims sovereignty becomes a better model for their children. The professional who pursues excellence raises standards in their field. The citizen who governs themselves well contributes to a healthier society. Your personal development, from this view, represents your contribution to collective human flourishing. Regardless of your specific framework, connecting your pursuit of personal kingship to larger questions of meaning and purpose prevents it from becoming merely another form of self-centered striving. The goal isn't to become a king for the sake of ego gratification, but to develop your capacities so you can fulfill your unique purpose, whatever you understand that purpose to be. The practice of reflection and self-examination plays a crucial role in maintaining and developing personal kingship over time. Without regular reflection, you can easily drift off course, continuing patterns that no longer serve you, pursuing objectives that no longer align with your values, missing opportunities for course correction and growth. Regular reflection might involve daily journaling, weekly reviews of your progress and challenges, monthly assessments of whether your activities align with your stated priorities, annual evaluations of your overall direction and satisfaction. The specific practices matter less than the commitment to regularly stepping back from the rush of daily activity to examine whether you're governing your kingdom wisely. These reflection practices serve multiple purposes. They help you notice patterns you might otherwise miss, recognize when you're drifting from your commitments, celebrate progress that daily perspective makes invisible, identify needed adjustments before small problems become major crises, and maintain conscious connection to your larger purposes and values. Many people resist reflection because it requires facing uncomfortable truths about gaps between intention and action, about ways they're compromising values, about results that aren't matching effort. But this discomfort, like the discomfort of physical exercise, serves a valuable purpose. It provides the information necessary for genuine improvement, rather than allowing you to continue ineffective patterns indefinitely. The relationship between personal kingship and rest deserves attention, because many people misunderstand sovereignty as requiring constant productivity and effort. But true kings understand that sustainable excellence requires rhythms of intense effort and genuine recovery, periods of expansion and consolidation, times of pushing forward and times of replenishing resources. A kingdom that's constantly at war, that never allows its people rest, that demands maximum output continuously, will eventually collapse from exhaustion. Your personal kingdom operates under similar constraints. You cannot maintain peak performance indefinitely without proper rest, recovery, and renewal. This means building rest into your rhythm as a strategic practice rather than something you do only when you're too exhausted to continue. It means taking genuine time off where you disconnect from work rather than remaining constantly available. It means getting adequate sleep rather than treating it as an optional luxury. It means incorporating practices that replenish your energy rather than only engaging in activities that deplete it. Many high achievers struggle with this because rest feels like weakness or waste, like time that could be spent on productive activity. But this thinking confuses activity with effectiveness. The person who works 16 hours daily while exhausted often accomplishes less than the person who works 8 hours while well rested and focused. Quality of effort matters more than mere quantity, and quality requires adequate recovery. Understanding the different forms of capital you're building through personal kingship provides helpful perspective on your development. Most people think primarily about financial capital, but you're actually building multiple forms of wealth simultaneously, each valuable and each requiring conscious attention. Human capital refers to your skills, knowledge, and capabilities, everything you know and can do. This form of capital determines your earning potential and your capacity to solve problems and create value. Every hour you invest in learning, every skill you develop, every bit of expertise you acquire, you're building human capital that can never be taken from you. Social capital represents your relationships and network, the web of connections that can provide support, opportunities, and collaboration. Building genuine relationships based on mutual respect and authentic care creates a form of wealth that often proves more valuable than money. The person with strong social capital can access resources, information, and opportunities unavailable to isolated individuals regardless of their financial wealth. Reputational capital reflects what others believe about your character, competence, and reliability. Building strong reputation requires years of consistent behavior demonstrating integrity, quality, and trustworthiness. Once established, good reputation opens doors and creates opportunities. Once damaged, it's extremely difficult to restore. Spiritual or psychological capital represents your inner resources, your resilience, your capacity for joy and meaning, your mental and emotional well-being. This form of capital determines your ability to enjoy whatever external success you achieve and to weather inevitable difficulties without being destroyed by them. Viewing your development through this broader lens prevents the common mistake of focusing exclusively on financial wealth while neglecting other crucial forms of capital. The person who builds only financial capital but neglects their health, relationships, character, and inner life often discovers too late that they've succeeded according to narrow metrics, while failing at life more broadly defined. The practice of celebration and acknowledgement of progress deserves more attention than it typically receives in discussions of achievement and excellence. Many people, driven by ambition and focused on gaps between current reality and desired outcomes, never pause to acknowledge how far they've come. They're constantly dissatisfied, always focused on what remains undone rather than recognizing what they've accomplished. This chronic dissatisfaction might seem like a virtue, like the mark of someone with high standards who refuses to settle for mediocrity, but it actually undermines long-term success because it makes the journey joyless and unsustainable. The person who never feels satisfied, who cannot acknowledge progress, who treats every milestone as merely a stepping stone to the next challenge, burns out eventually. They lose connection to why they're pursuing excellence in the first place. Building celebration into your practice doesn't mean becoming complacent or lowering your standards. It means pausing periodically to recognize how far you've traveled, to appreciate the victories you've won, to honor the effort you've invested. This acknowledgement serves crucial psychological functions, reinforcing positive behaviors, maintaining motivation, providing emotional fuel for continued effort. The celebration can be simple. It doesn't require expensive rewards or elaborate rituals. It might just mean taking a moment to consciously appreciate that you kept your commitments this week, that you handled a difficult situation with integrity, that you're further along the path than you were a month ago. This simple acknowledgement, repeated regularly, creates a positive emotional association with the hard work of personal development rather than making it feel like grinding obligation. As we approach the culmination of this exploration, it's worth addressing directly the question many people secretly harbor: is all this effort really worth it? Is the hard work of claiming personal sovereignty, developing yourself, maintaining high standards, pursuing excellence, is it truly worth the sacrifice and difficulty it requires? The honest answer is that it depends on what you compare it to. If you compare the effort required for personal kingship to a fantasy of effortless comfort, then no, it's not worth it. But that comparison is dishonest, because effortless comfort isn't actually available. Life involves difficulty regardless of whether you pursue excellence or drift through mediocrity. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, but what kind of challenges you'll face and what they'll produce in your life. The person who pursues personal sovereignty faces the challenges of discipline, delayed gratification, stepping outside comfort zones, and maintaining standards when it would be easier to lower them. These challenges are real and demanding, but through facing them, this person builds capability, confidence, meaningful achievement, and the deep satisfaction that comes from living with integrity and purpose. The person who avoids these challenges faces different difficulties: the slow erosion of self-respect that comes from repeatedly breaking commitments to yourself, the anxiety of financial instability that results from undisciplined spending and lack of planning, the emptiness of unrealized potential, the regret of looking back on a life spent drifting rather than building. These challenges are often more painful precisely because they produce nothing valuable: no growth, no achievement, no meaningful development. When understood this way, the question isn't whether to face difficulty, but which difficulties you choose and what they produce. Personal kingship represents the choice to face constructive difficulties that build something valuable rather than destructive difficulties that lead nowhere meaningful. Let me share one final story that brings these principles together. There was a young woman who grew up in a family where mediocrity was the norm, where ambition was viewed with suspicion, where anyone who tried to rise above the common level faced mockery and sabotage. She absorbed these messages deeply, learning to hide any talents or desires that might make her stand out. In her 20s, she lived according to these inherited limitations, taking jobs that required little of her, maintaining relationships that demanded nothing, pursuing pleasures that provided temporary escape without genuine satisfaction. She felt safe but also slowly dying inside, aware of capacities she wasn't using, possibilities she wasn't exploring, a life she wasn't really living. At 28, something shifted. She couldn't later identify exactly what triggered the change, perhaps just accumulated dissatisfaction reaching a critical threshold. She began to wonder what might be possible if she stopped limiting herself according to other people's expectations, if she claimed sovereignty over her own life and pursued what she actually valued rather than what her family and culture prescribed. The decision to change felt terrifying because it meant stepping outside everything familiar, disappointing people whose approval she'd always sought, facing the possibility of failure in full public view. But continuing as she was felt like a slower death, safe but meaningless. She started with her professional life, identifying a field that genuinely interested her and beginning the long process of building expertise. This required returning to school while working, sacrificing evenings and weekends that she would have previously spent in passive entertainment, tolerating the discomfort of being a beginner in an area where others had years of experience. Her family responded exactly as she feared, with mockery and subtle sabotage, warnings that she was wasting her time, that she would fail, that she should accept her place instead of reaching for things beyond her. These responses hurt deeply, but they also clarified something important. She could either live according to their limitations or claim sovereignty over her own direction. She couldn't do both. The first year was brutal, learning while exhausted, facing her own incompetence as a beginner, struggling financially, dealing with isolation as old friendships faded and new ones hadn't yet formed. She questioned her decisions constantly, wondering if her family was right, if she should give up this painful pursuit and return to comfortable mediocrity. But she also noticed changes that kept her moving forward. She felt more alive than she had in years, engaged with challenges that demanded her full capacity rather than sleepwalking through easy routine. She discovered abilities she hadn't known she possessed. She found satisfaction in incremental progress, in keeping commitments to herself, in building something that reflected her genuine values rather than inherited limitations. By year 3, the external results began matching the internal transformation. She completed her training, secured a position in her new field, started earning income that reflected her developed capabilities. More importantly, she had fundamentally transformed her relationship with herself. She now knew through direct experience that she could set ambitious goals and achieve them, that she could persist through difficulty, that she could govern her life according to her own standards rather than other people's limitations. 10 years later, she had built a career she found genuinely meaningful, developed relationships with people who appreciated rather than diminished her, created financial stability, and most importantly, proved to herself that personal sovereignty was possible, that you could claim your throne regardless of your starting point. Looking back, she recognized that the journey had been exactly as difficult as she feared, maybe more so. But she also recognized that the alternative, continuing in comfortable mediocrity, would have been far more painful in the long term. The effort of personal kingship had been worth it, not because it produced a perfect life free from all difficulty, but because it produced a meaningful life, a life she had consciously chosen and built, a life that reflected her values rather than her limitations. This story, like the others shared throughout this exploration, illustrates that personal kingship isn't an abstract philosophical concept, but a practical path available to anyone willing to claim it. The specifics vary. Everyone faces different challenges, different starting points, different obstacles. But the fundamental pattern remains consistent, deciding to claim sovereignty over your own existence, maintaining that commitment despite difficulty and doubt, building your capacities systematically, and ultimately creating a life that reflects conscious choice rather than passive drift. As you consider these principles and stories, the question isn't whether they're true in some abstract sense, but whether you're willing to test them in your own life. Are you willing to claim your throne, to take responsibility for governing your kingdom, to pursue excellence despite the effort it requires? Are you willing to face the temporary discomfort of discipline in exchange for the lasting satisfaction of meaningful achievement? Are you willing to disappoint people whose approval depends on you remaining small? These questions only you can answer, and the answer comes through action rather than analysis. You discover whether personal kingship is possible for you by attempting it, by starting where you are with what you have, by establishing sovereignty over one area and gradually expanding your kingdom. The journey will be challenging. No honest presentation of these principles can claim otherwise. You will face obstacles both external and internal. You will question your decisions during difficult periods. You will be tempted to abandon your standards when maintaining them becomes inconvenient. But you will also discover capacities you didn't know you possessed. You will build satisfaction that shallow pleasures can never provide. You will create a life that reflects your highest values rather than your lowest impulses. Remember that every person who has achieved something significant started exactly where you are now, uncertain, inexperienced, facing obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who remain trapped in mediocrity isn't primarily talent or luck or favorable circumstances. It's the decision to claim sovereignty and the commitment to maintain it despite all difficulties. Your kingdom awaits, not somewhere in the future when conditions become perfect, but right now in this present moment. The throne you've been seeking exists within you, waiting for you to claim it. Every man a king isn't merely an inspiring phrase. It's a fundamental truth about human potential, a truth you can verify through your own experience if you're willing to begin the journey. Before we conclude, I want to encourage you to please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library. Your support helps this channel grow and allows us to continue bringing you powerful, life-changing content like this. Every subscription, every like, every share helps us reach more people who need to hear these transformative ideas. The principles we've explored today, the concept of personal sovereignty, the practices of discipline and integrity, the commitment to continuous growth, these ideas have the power to transform lives completely. But they only have power when they move from abstract concepts to lived experience, when you take them from this video into your daily life and begin applying them consistently. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions become more favorable. Start with one small area where you can establish sovereignty, perhaps your morning routine, perhaps your finances, perhaps your health. Choose one territory where you'll demonstrate to yourself that you can govern with consistency and integrity. Build from that foundation, expanding your kingdom gradually as your capacity grows. Remember that personal kingship is a journey rather than a destination, a continuous practice of self-governance rather than a final achievement. There will always be new territories to claim, new capacities to develop, new challenges to overcome. This ongoing nature of the work isn't a bug, it's a feature, because growth and development themselves provide much of life's meaning and satisfaction. The person you become through pursuing personal sovereignty, through claiming your throne and governing your kingdom wisely, that person is worth all the effort required. Not because you become perfect, but because you become authentic. Not because you eliminate all problems, but because you develop the capacity to face them with courage and dignity. Not because you achieve some final state of completion, but because you engage fully with the magnificent challenge of human development. Please also check our videos library here on Audiobook Library. We have curated an extensive collection of transformative content covering personal development, success principles, financial wisdom, and timeless philosophy. Each video offers insights that can help you on your journey toward personal excellence and sovereignty. Whether you're interested in expanding your knowledge, developing new skills, or finding inspiration for your own transformation, our library contains resources that can support your growth. Your potential is far greater than you currently imagine. Your possibilities more extensive than your current circumstances suggest. Your capacity for growth and achievement more profound than you've yet demonstrated. But potential means nothing without action. Possibilities remain abstract without pursuit. Capacity develops only through use. The time to begin is now. The place to start is here. The person who must act is you. Claim your throne. Govern your kingdom. Pursue your excellence. And discover through direct experience that you were always meant to be royalty, that sovereignty was your birthright all along, that every man truly is a king when he decides to rule himself with wisdom, dignity, and unwavering commitment to his highest potential.